Well, welcome back to the Dallas Prospect. We have something to talk about. Man, oh man, do we have something to talk about. I'll be honest with you guys. When I planned to go live today, I didn't know what to expect. I certainly did not come in here with the assumption that this Klay Thompson thing would have already resolved itself. I actually felt like this might drag into the night, and as has happened so many times in the past, we would ultimately find that the Mavericks were leveraged in a situation and they don't get their guy. They're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Really not even the considered bridesmaid in this case. I really had a feeling this was going to go the way of so many other primo free agents. And it's interesting to see, for once, the Dallas Mavericks get their top target in free agency. Now, you can say, like, oh, well, before last year, it was re-signing Kyrie. Yeah, but you had Kyrie. It was re-signing, and you already had that leverage. This is the first time, and it's not lost on me in the least bit, that it's under a new ownership group, governorship group, whatever, and that it was very strategic that during the last week or so, we learned that, like, oh, Mark Cuban's really not even involved hardly at all. Like, really, he has no involvement. This clarification came out ahead of free agency because, as I have said before and maintained, nobody ever forgot that Mark blew up the title team. Didn't matter that we went 10, 12, 13, 14, whatever years beyond that. Nobody forgot that. And Donnie Nelson, combined with Mark Cuban being more preoccupied with Shark Tank and whatever other nonsense, just never allowed Dallas to be in the real running for these kinds of things. The difference is that you have a capable GM now. I don't care whatever you think of the Mavericks and their potential to ultimately get a championship, even with Luka, even with Kyrie. What you cannot dispute is that their management and their ability to make big things happen has radically transformed for the better under Nico Harrison in his role. Like, his job as general manager of the Mavericks, what he's been able to do, whether it was swinging, his only blip is Jalen Brunson. And that was his kind of welcome to the NBA moment. But, like, whether it was the initial trade for Kyrie and all of the criticism and skepticism that came with it. Even though, yeah, this past season ended in a rough kind of way with the last round, the finals there, going down 4-1. Yeah, that sucked. But you know what? You still have built a very, very good team. You proved that Luka and Kyrie can work well together. You proved that you had an eye for this talent that you were able to get, and we'll get into this in a minute, but guys like Derrick Jones Jr., Dante Exum, you were able to get these kind of guys in here on these minimum deals, and especially in the case of DJJ, really, really make things work and happen for you. All of that got you not just into the finals, but gave you a sense that, like, this isn't just a fluke, like, oh, this team caught fire at the right moment. You legitimately look at this team and think, like, they're going to be relevant. They're going to be, like, in the thick of contention. Now, the West has gotten very good. I love some of the things like the Pelicans, for instance, have done. But even still, I had some concerns. And, when the Mavericks, as I referenced before, the best thing about Nico here isn't just, like, yeah, getting Kyrie, seeing the veteran minimum deals that could be had with, like, Derrick Jones Jr. and Dante Exum, but also then making other moves that they did, like PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. Those were huge moves. Obviously, those last two in particular put you over the top, where you went from a team barely at 500 to a team that 5 months later was playing in the finals. That's legit. But not resting on the laurels, not being overly attached to the players. And I don't say that to sound heartless, but it is, when you're building these rosters, the worst thing you can do is just fall in love with your own guys. You can't do that. Jerry Jones makes that mistake with the Cowboys all the time. That's why they just keep paying their own guys to stay there instead of drafting their replacements or finding other parts that work in free agency. Mark Cuban was the same thing. And where they have finally found something is that when their leverage with Derrick Jones Jr. started to really slide, and it was clear that was going to drag out, when it was clear that there was that preoccupying with that, what they had said was their top and second highest priority entering free agency, when that was going to drag out and take them out of the Klay Thompson sweepstakes, while the Lakers, led by LeBron and them, tried everything they could to pry Klay Thompson away. In the past, the Mavericks would and have stood pat and just said, our offer is our offer. We got the most money to offer. Mavericks could have offered 4 for $68 for Klay Thompson. He ended up taking less to choose Dallas. Now, I know some people are like, hey, the quiet part out loud is he chose Luka over LeBron. Over 39-year-old LeBron James. Yes, I would sincerely hope so. But it's not just Luka, it's Kyrie. Like, Anthony Davis is a walking injury. He can still be great when he's healthy, but he's a walking injury. LeBron's 39 years old. Like, if you're talking about a multi-year deal, are you going to keep banking on that? No, I wouldn't. The only question would be like, okay, he stays in, California. He stays in that nice area. And, he's with the spectacle of the Lakers. We know his dad was had a connection to the Lakers, obviously. So, like, yeah, there was some reason for that, but it was never a more attractive offer than Dallas in terms of the money, in terms of the role and the opportunity. Dude, Luka creates... Klay Thompson is the second most efficient just spot-up shooter in NBA history, you could say. Luka creates the most wide-open looks for his teammates. Like, you just look at the finals. Dallas starters with wide-open looks from three shot like 17%. That right there is practically your series, because in the modern NBA, the three-point shot is everything. The Celtics were lethal in those situations. The Mavericks were just painful. And I love Derrick Jones Jr. I said numerous times I wanted Dallas to find a way to keep him. But you know what? He took the deal he took. He's now a Clipper. And Dallas had to look at the situation and say, like, dude, he's now represented by Clutch, LeBron, Rich Paul, all that. If they're dragging their feet to try and impact the Klay situation, make it where the Mavericks are either going to lose Derrick Jones Jr. or risk losing out on Klay, the Mavericks in the past might have found a way to lose both. They might have completely stood pat, let him walk, and then maybe they kept Derrick Jones, or maybe they find a way to lose that too. But at the end of the day, they don't stand pat. They do make a move, and I really, really like what they get with Naji. Like, really. Now, I don't think he's pound for pound the same defender as Derrick Jones Jr. was, and I do think Derrick Jones Jr., especially his athleticism and his ability to switch onto guards at point of attack and stuff, phenomenal. You are going to miss that. The difference is that Naji in like wide open 3-point looks was like 40% last year. His overall 3-point percentage isn't that different from Derrick Jones Jr., especially if you look at their careers. But if you just look at like the wide open opportunities, which was what we just said was the kryptonite for the Mavericks in the finals, that's your difference. Like, that really is your difference. He's a dog. He is a great defender. He is versatile, though not quite in the same ways of Derrick Jones Jr., and he doesn't have the athleticism and like that crazy lob threat that DJJ brought. But you still have an awful lot to like with that signing, and getting him at, what was it? Let me see the exact details of his deal here. I think it worked out to like $12 million per year or something that he was able to get. But being able to pick him up and bring in that kind of shooting touch, just that 3-point consistency, huge. Absolutely huge for Dallas. Yeah, Naji Marshall ended up going 3-year, $27 million. Derrick Jones Jr. got 3 for $30 from the Clippers. So not that different in terms of money. But the thing is, somebody, I wish I knew who said this. I wish I remember who said this on Twitter, because it was my favorite perspective on it. Now that Paul George is gone from the Clippers, it's like Yeah, going from Derrick Jones Jr. to Naji Marshall is nowhere near as painful as going from Paul George to Derrick Jones Jr. Again, DJJ, I love you. You're going to be one of my favorite one-year Mavericks ever. But that's just truth. Like, that's just irrefutable proof. I wish that we had resolved a way to keep Derrick Jones Jr., but when he made the switch to clutch and was kind of being used as this pawn in this leverage game for the Lakers to try and get Klay, the whole thing just kind of fell apart. And Dallas, recognizing this, said, yeah, we're not going to do this. We're going to make sure we make a very good pivot now so that we can stay in the Klay thing, and defensively we're going to stay pretty much where we were, except we're going to add some shooting in this equation too. So they spent slightly less and managed to really address that while staying in the Klay sweepstakes, which, had that not panned out, you might have looked at it and said, was this ultimately a worthwhile trade-off? I think it would have been closer to a push, better in some areas, slight step back maybe in a couple. But the fact that you pull this thing off, the fact that you actually pull off this, like let's look at what they've done. They traded Tim Hardaway Jr., and yeah, they sent out a lot, but you get Quentin Grimes. You get a very nice piece in return. Good. By the way, that piece made Josh Green dispensable. He's starting the first year of a new deal, and we talked about the sugar glider. Yeah, man, he's got his strengths and the things about him that you covet, but there's also the shortcomings, and those have never gone away. Maybe not here, at least. So the fact that you're able to make this sign and trade work to get Klay Thompson, he takes less money for Dallas. It's about 4 for $50 in Dallas. Again, first time we've heard the actual like consideration, part of it being the no state income tax for Texas being a huge factor in the decision. The Mavericks are closer than the Lakers are to real contention. And so you're able to get that. He gets his three-year deal with a player option, so he's not tying his hands to the Mavericks forever. If it's not a fit, okay, within a couple years, he's on his way out. It is what it is. But you're able to add one of, if not like the best spot-up three-point shooter in NBA history. You're able to add a dude. I said 3 for 50, right? You're able to add a dude who has been very capable. Obviously, with his injuries and stuff he's had in recent years, he's not what he was. But I would still say, a lot of people look at how he kind of finished out the year last year and make a determination on him that I don't think is indicative of it. I think overall his season was good. It just tailed off towards the end as he hit a rut and it got rough. His games against the Mavericks last year were nothing to write home about. I think one of them, he was 1 of 11. So there are some things there. But you're able in your offseason maneuvering to move on from Tim Hardaway Jr. You move Josh Green to Charlotte, and for Klay Thompson, it's like in this multi-team deal with the Warriors, you end up losing Josh Green and like a couple second-round picks, and you add Klay Thompson on a 3 for 50. Oh, I said 4 for 50. My bad. Yeah, 3 for 50. I think I was trying to say earlier when the Mavericks had the option to give him a 4 for 68 is what it was initially being talked about. But yes, it is a 3-year deal. You're correct. But yeah, it's like, dude, you get that kind of maneuvering and pull it off, and man, that is a masterful job in terms of roster building, in terms of, again, just doing the tough thing. Like, you love your players, but you can't slap a ring on every one of them. You can't. And Josh Green, he's a great X Factor guy, brings great energy. He had his moment in Game 5 where he hit like 4 threes for the game. Late third quarter was still like your leading scorer at one point, as wild as that is. But he was doing his thing. But there was also, I think, a clear ceiling there where he was never going to step into that next level that Dallas needed. And so it's like, yeah, for something like this, he had to be one of their best assets they would willingly get rid of. They did fully guarantee Jaden Hardy's salary next year. It's just $2 million. So because Tim Hardaway Jr. is gone, because Josh Green has now been dealt, I think Jaden Hardy is going to get really every opportunity now to shine. And that's awesome, especially with how he was able to grow and like find his kind of step and rhythm with this team late in the playoffs. I think having another year older for Derrick Lively is going to be huge. Again, this team, the core of this team was only together 5 months. Now, yeah, 3 of those pieces are gone. Derrick Jones Jr. is the only one you didn't really want to part with, but you had to let him go because if you had overpaid to make sure you kept him, you were going to be out of the Klay sweepstakes. Because if it was 3 for 30 to keep Derrick Jones Jr., I think Dallas would have done it. I think with the switch to clutch, I think they were leveraging for more because Dallas. Now, to be clear, because he was a 1-year player, it's not like Dallas had bird rights to him. That's not how that works. So Dallas had some leverage, but not a lot. And if it was just 3 for 30 to keep him and then we stayed in the Klay sweepstakes, I don't know that Dallas would have made the move they did for Naji Marshall. I think they made the move because the asking price was a lot more and it wasn't reasonable to what they felt his market should be. And so when that was the case, they pivoted. They said, okay, where's the best bang for buck value we find? I think in terms of what you got and what you're going to be able to bring to the table with Marshall, I think it's a very, very solid pivot. Like, I don't think it's a significant downgrade. I don't think you're going to have to worry about that. The 3-point shooting, yeah, we saw stretches of it for Derrick Jones Jr., but man, it's just not the same animal. It's really not. So having this ability now where you're going to have multiple shooters coming in, Klay Thompson, obviously, like I said, one of the best 3-point shooters ever, particularly spot-up shooting. He doesn't have to dribble the ball a single damn time. He's going to be spoon-fed like clockwork by Luka and by Kyrie. That's it. Now, Josh Green, you did have someone who was a deceptively good playmaker, whether it was his passing or his off the dribble a little bit. But again, I never got the sense from him that there was just this brimming confidence for him to really consistently put it together. And maybe he finds that in Charlotte because now there's less pressure. But, until the last stretch of this year, there really wasn't a lot of pressure here other than like, oh, you play with Luka, you got to try and do something to make this team, like do your part to make this team a contender. It's a different ask, though. So looking at all of this, I think Dallas has added significant shooting. I think they're still very good defensively. And when I look at the parts that came in, respective to the parts that went out, it's like, yeah, this team is for real. This team is establishing, like, we're not content just being here this year in the finals and, hey, we even won a game, woohoo. They're not content with that. They looked at it and said, we're going to take a step forward. We're going to be aggressive. We're not going to be passive and just say, run it back, baby. I wouldn't have faulted them if they had. I would have said, like, I think that's probably a mistake, but I wouldn't have faulted them to a significant degree other than saying, can you find another shooter off the bench? Can you find another guy who can be a knockdown shooter for you at least? They just added like one of the best ever for that. And then they got another guy that's been very capable of that while being a solid defender. As TG points out in the comments, like, Naji can body up power forwards. That wasn't a thing for Derrick Jones Jr. Derrick Jones Jr. was, he was able to guard guards because of that. But, point of attack defenders, there's not a plethora of those available. I want to find. It was a great tweet from Nick Angstad the other day on point of attack defenders. They're not in like they're not hugely available. Oh, by the way, here's that 3-point percentage thing, open 3-point percentage thing in the finals. Stat Mamba said wide open 3-point percentage in the finals. The Celtic starters shot 42.6%. The Maverick starters shot 17.6%. There's your finals. That's your difference. And again, Derrick Jones Jr., not a strong 3-point shooter. Washington, PJ, he's had moments in the playoffs, but he wasn't great in the finals shooting the 3. He did a lot of other things, played hard, but there was still more that you needed. So the fact that you're able to do this and not not find yourself in this kind of predicament where you're just stuck. You're addressing your specific needs without giving up too much defensively is huge. You know, especially on Najee Marshall. Najee Harris, who is that? I think that was an old running back or something from the NFL. My brain flipped back into Cowboys coverage, talking about like a Steelers matchup or something. So Najee Marshall, 26 years old, 6'7", with a 7'1" wingspan, good defender, 40.7% on wide open threes, 39.6% on catch and shoot threes, and 42% from the corners. There you go. There's your fit. That is major value there. If you're gonna have to lose Derrick Jones Jr., that is the kind of guy you go and get. A guy who brings you much of what you were able to get from that, and maybe if it's not an exact apples to apples comparison, is at least close enough that it addresses many other needs that you have, and then brings a dimension that you simply didn't have there. Cowboy X Factor knew exactly the reference I accidentally made. Just awesome stuff. So I love all of this that they've been able to add here. I'm just looking through some of my notes. Anything else that I want? If you guys got questions, by the way, throw them in the chat. LeBron to Dallas. Don't see that happening now. I was not the least bit surprised that the Lakers drafted Bronny just to make sure LeBron stays. B-Rob says, yes, sir, DDP. Number one hater first in the house. Frank, what's good? Mavs in the arm race. The Mavericks are the arms race, sir. They are the arms race. I wanted to read this from NBA University on Twitter talking about, he posted this about 10 days ago talking about Najee Marshall. He says, Najee Marshall, the knife, makes a living giving hell to ball defenders. He has a 7'1" wingspan and uses it to pickpocket everybody. Strong anticipation and understanding of space. Passable shooter with really nice connective playmaking and closeout attacking in his bag. Yeah, that's a hell of a pivot. So the one thing that felt like a little bit of a disappointing loss for me with Derrick Jones Jr., at least they made a solid pivot. That's a great pickup there. This from Tim McMahon also gives some context to the clutch thing I was talking about. Derrick Jones Jr.'s decision to switch agents this week complicated hopes of re-signing due to the NBA Player Association guideline of 15-day wait to change representation. Basically complicated things where it reduced their ability to negotiate with Derrick Jones Jr. And between that and the initial kind of ask, not really able to go back and forth, the Mavericks are just like, screw it, we got to move now. So yeah, I like it. And Nick Angstad points out that Grimes can also, and Exum even, can help cobble together some of that fit for what they need, what they lose defensively on the Derrick Jones front. I'll be curious to see as well what Dallas, or not, excuse me, not with Dallas, with the 76ers making their signing, bringing in Paul George. I'll be curious to see what happens with some of those guys, because to make that $212 million deal, I think it was, work, they're going to have to renounce some rights or something to that effect. So there are going to be guys out there like your Buddy Hield. Now, I never even mentioned Buddy Hield this time around because financially I just knew it wasn't going to work. I didn't expect, even if the Klay thing didn't happen, I didn't think you were going to be getting Buddy Hield. And even if you did, he's got no defense to really help you there. So I didn't have that expectation, but I was curious to see, like, oh, is there going to be like a fire sale that opens up for you in one of those markets? But really not so much. Okay, here's that thing I was looking for earlier. The point of attack defenders list that Nick Angstad put together. He says, how many players in the NBA would you feel confident to lead your point of attack defense on a championship level team? Assuming player health, this is who I came up with. He's got Drew Holiday, Derrick White, Jaylen Brown, KCP, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Herb Jones, Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, Jalen Suggs, Marcus Smart. Notice how many of these guys are Celtics, by the way. Or I know Smart's not anymore, but was for a long, long time. Jaden McDaniels, Dylan Brooks, Matisse Thybulle, Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, Cason Wallace, Gary Payton, and he's even got Pat Bev on the list. Yeah. And Jonathan Isaac. Isaac would have been kind of interesting. So that's really what it looks at there. The West has gotten stronger, aside from the fact that the Clippers seem like they're folding up shop a little bit. I think they're going to take a step back. They're trying to find a way to shop rust. I did read something that the Nuggets were, for some reason, kind of interested. That's a baffling one to me. But the Nuggets continue to lose pieces from that championship squad, and I think it's going to catch up to them. So the Nuggets feel like they've taken a step back. The Clippers are taking a step back. I think the Thunder have actually done a lot of really nice stuff with their big man they got from the Knicks, Hartenstein. I really like that pickup for them. And their draft picks, I thought they did a good job with. I thought the way they managed their cap with Wiggins and Isaiah Joe, really solid how they've managed that. So I do think the Thunder are going to stay around if they have a problem. I think they've addressed some of those weaknesses as well. The Lakers got better, but I still think they're a little ways away, especially now with this deal not coming together for them, getting Klay. So the West is going to be very interesting. And I mentioned earlier, too, I love what the Pelicans have done. Oh, and I'd even mentioned for OKC, Alex Caruso. My God, getting Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey only. Woo! That is a serious upgrade. And I actually forgot he was on the Thunder at one point when he still had hair. For whatever that's worth. Let's see. Let me ask this in the chat. Is Klay Thompson the biggest free agent signing in Mavericks history? Just name value. I understand they re-signed Kyrie. You could say that. But like he was here. He was acquired in a trade beforehand and then re-signed. To me, that's different. Is Klay Thompson the biggest name value signing in Mavericks history? That is true, Cowboy X Factor, that Josh Green and Grant Williams are teammates again. Seth Curry is a free agent. I don't want, there's no role for Seth Curry. I love Seth Curry. There was a time when I said he was one of my absolute favorite one-year wonder Mavs. We've had 2 other cups of coffee since then, and the magic is gone. Leave the memories alone. There is an open roster spot for the Mavericks to consider, though, so that is worth saying. Woj points out that Klay Thompson had 4-year offers for more money, but is taking less, offsetting that for the chance to win a 5th championship, and obviously the difference in the state income tax, according to agent Greg Lawrence. So that was a motivating factor for him. Still amazing to me that all Dallas is giving up in this multi-team trade is 2 second-round picks and Josh Green. And Josh Green is going to the Hornets. He's not even going to Golden State. That's what's even more wild to me about all this. Like, man, you didn't have to give up really anything. Just found out the Lakers wanted to offer Klay 4 for $80, so Klay took $30 million pay cut and 1 less year. That's wild. I thought the Mavericks had the flexibility to go 4 for $68. I knew he took less to go with the Mavericks. That's wild, though, if it's that much of a difference that LA was offering. Again, it's 39-year-old LeBron and made of glass Anthony Davis, and how much else is really there that makes you say, like, yes, this team is there. The luster of the Lakers and his own personal connection would have been the biggest factor in anything, I feel like. So Dallas always made more sense if personal feelings were set aside. Of course, I said similar things talking about Jalen Brunson, and that proved not to be true. I felt like that 2022 playoff run, if anything, showed him and Luka could coexist, similar to how we see Luka and Kyrie coexisting now. But the money offer was never going to be in that same ballpark. If you had given Jalen the max, which would have been like a $120 million deal or some nonsense, he would have taken it. But I think you had to go max to keep him, and Dallas wasn't going to do that. So he took the max he could get from the Knicks to go there, and it's worked out for him. Hell, he was just on in a spot with Halliburton on, what was it, SmackDown or something, where he hopped the guardrail and was like standing in the ring with a chair, stopping Halliburton from handing Logan Paul a chair or something like that. The nonsense of professional wrestling crossing over with basketball is amazing. I have fond memories of Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone, the awfulness of him aside, in the 90s, doing their whole angle with the NWO and, hey, my namesake, Diamond Dallas Page. Frank says, also DDP, the Mavericks have not lost a single future first-round pick in any of these trades or signings, and that is significant. Now, they do have some of those tied up right now. Obviously, you got out from under the original KP deal finally, but you do have a first-round pick, I think, tied up in the PJ deal that you just made with Charlotte, so there is that to consider. Santos says, I'd argue Naji is a better defender, especially on bigger, strong wings or guards like Jaylen Brown, and wasn't given the same minutes as Derrick Jones Jr. Definitely think Naji will be a better all-around than Derrick Jones Jr. I appreciate the perspective. I would love to see that be the case. Yep. Matisse Thybulle is a point of attack defender. Yep, I agree, 100%. Who should the Mavs add to the roster with the $4 million or so left for that mid-level exception? I'll be curious to see what they look at there. I really don't want them to look at Seth Curry. Again, we brought him in 3 separate times. It never works out. It's always a 1 year, or in the case of this past year, half a season, barely playing. Leave the memories alone, move on. Let him stay and finish out his career with Charlotte, where his dad played. That'll be nice for him. Or maybe send him to Golden State to play 1 year with his brother. I don't know. But that'd be interesting. I'll have to look at the market, what we think we can get for $4 million. The thing is, I love the fact that, like, normally we'd be like, oh, $4 million, that's such little money. Why would we even like worry about it? Like, so I've watched times where Mavericks in the past have let trade exceptions worth like $16 million expire because they couldn't figure out how to use it. That's infuriating. The fact that, like, Nico Harrison was able last year to be like, mid-levels exceptions all we got, huh? Screw it. Derrick Jones Jr., get in here. Still limited, huh? Dante Exum, bring it on down. Let's go. Both of those guys were huge this year, especially Derrick Jones Jr. So, again, I hate that it didn't work to keep Derrick Jones Jr. Like, I don't know how that would have looked if you had managed to keep him. The difference is, I feel like the Clippers, because of the situation losing Paul George, they could offer him something Dallas ultimately couldn't. Not just $3 million more, apparently, but they could offer him a guaranteed starting job. He couldn't get that in Dallas, especially if they were going to get Klay. You couldn't give him that. So, like, for a guy who, again, told us during last year, like, I took a minimum deal to come to Dallas and a 1-year deal when I could have gotten more money to stay with Chicago. I could have gotten a better deal. They wanted to keep me long term. But it was like, you have to define you're eventually getting to a point where you're limited in your remaining opportunities to stake your claim to your role and your money. He took the far, far less money to stake his claim to that role. And now he's getting that role in a different place. I kind of wish it had been here, but at the same time, I think Dallas made the right move. And especially if you weren't going to be able to get him for that same, like, 3 for 30 that the Clippers just did, yeah, you couldn't have done that. And because of his change in representation, that's kind of a Trojan horse sort of thing. You stay tied up in that, trying to navigate that while you're losing out on the big fish. So I think Nico Harrison did a brilliant job in managing and pivoting in this free agency. So absolutely love it. Let's see. Could Klay shoot his best with Dallas? Could he, like, career best? I don't know. Maybe from a percentage standpoint. Again, Dallas generates, like, the most open looks in the league, and that's, like, the entirety of Luka's tenure with the Mavericks. So, yeah, he'll get the looks. He'll absolutely get the opportunities. And, again, we talk about guys with gravity. He's going to open up the spacing, because that was part of the trouble when you got to the finals. When P.J. Washington wasn't able to hit threes like he was doing against Oklahoma City. When Derrick Jones Jr., wasn't able to hit threes like he had done at times against Oklahoma City and even a little bit against the Timberwolves, Dallas's offense stagnated a little bit because suddenly, yeah, you got two guys that can weave through the paint and get anything they want in Luka and Kyrie, but defenders are sagging off the shooters. They're daring you. OKC did the same thing, but Dallas was able to get enough to make them pay. But they're daring those shooters to beat them, and Dallas just couldn't really get that. So when you can't open up that lob threat inside because you can't get that late double team shifting over to open up the alley-oop, he took a huge, vital aspect of the offense away from the Mavericks. And never getting that shooting going was what really, really hurt Dallas in the finals. And when the open shooters for the Mavericks, the open starters, are shooting 17.2% on wide open looks, yeah, that's going to be everything. So Klay addresses a major, major problem that Dallas experienced in the finals. And I think Marshall does as well. So it's a significant improvement on that. It's a different defensive look, but I do have trust at this point. I gave it very begrudgingly, but I do have trust in Jason Kidd and the coaching staff's ability to rework and retool the defense in the slight variation ways that they need to make this thing continue to work well. Also, just the fact that you're going to have another year of Derrick Lively's development is so huge. Like, Derrick Lively flashed numerous times throughout the year, but man, oh man, was it really in like when he came back from, a sprained knee, I think. He missed most of the end of the regular season and came back just in time for the start of the playoffs. He was different when he came back. It maybe took him that initial Clipper series to really, really find it, but he was such a difference maker for this team, and you saw suddenly everything was coming together. The mental side, the physical side, all of that was there. Having that foundation and now that experience that he's gotten going against these guys and these looks and having to deal with teams, trying to take him away in what he does the way that they do, it is going to be so invaluable to what he's able to bring to this team moving forward. I really think, and I've said this from the start, look back at my video when they drafted him, he's Tyson 2.0 because, yeah, we saw in that game 4 of the finals him bust out the corner 3. I think that's going to be an actual part of his game now where maybe not every game, but it's not going to be uncommon to see him taking 1 or 2 threes per game from that corner 3, and the way that that's going to force teams to change up how they guard Dallas, how that's going to open up space. That was part of what made Boston so good is you had 5 guys that could put the ball on the deck and get something, and at the same time, those same 5 guys could stand out there on the arc and just spread you out completely. And that's how you get like Al Horford just getting wide open spot up threes because he's just standing there waiting for the ball to come to him because somebody else penetrates, and then there's so much spacing, something's going to open up. Having that ability, even on a smaller scale, is so big for Dallas. And now that you can have the shooters, you can have Luka, Klay Thompson, Kyrie Irving, even a halfway passable percentage-wise Derrick Lively, just the threat of him being able to shoot a 3. Having those guys out there and like a PJ, who again is like 35% or something. His career is probably like 33, 34, but like through the playoffs for much of it was more like that 35%, 36% range. In the Thunder series was like 40% almost. Having those kind of shooters at your disposal and having guys off the bench like Jaden Hardy who can just be an absolute spark plug and really ignite, referencing his former team. That was it, right? Ignite. Is just so invaluable. So I love how the Mavericks have handled this. It would have been so easy for them to rest on their laurels and say, hey, this group only had 5 months together. Maybe we don't change really much of anything. Maybe we kick the tires on Klay, try to get a meeting with Klay, but you don't really change too much. You kind of know what you got, and you got something really good. Good is great. I know that sounds like an upgrade. Good is great. But when it's so apparent that the difference between you and a team that actually is great is as vast as it is, getting your ass handed to you in 5 games and your deficiencies brutally picked apart, then it's clear you can't rest on your laurels. And I think I was going to say ownership groups, former iterations of the Mavericks year over year with the previous ownership, with the previous general manager, president of basketball operations, all that, I think would have been far too willing to rest on the laurels. Maybe they would have gotten stars in their eyes over the idea of the big fish, taken that meeting with Klay or tried to get it, but it wouldn't have gone anywhere. And so we would have run out largely the same team and been more likely for a regression next year. Now, to be fair, when it's, hey, we at least made the finals, anything short of a title is going to be a regression. Anything short of at least getting back to the finals is going to be a regression. So you didn't have a whole lot of space to work with. But navigating it this way, I think, absolutely brilliant job. Can the Mavs win in the NBA with Klay and this team, asks Micah. I think so. I think they're capable for sure. Again, I really want to see how different the defense is going to look. But like when you look at how good this team was top to bottom, and it's like, hey, you've had three pieces depart. Tim Hardaway Jr., who after the midpoint of the year was more or less useless to us, had one good game in the playoffs. And no, I'm not counting his game 4 barrage against the Celtics. That I don't count that. Although I guess for his credit, sure. But you lose him, you lose Josh Green, and the only one that stings at all, and it's more on a personal level, is Derrick Jones Jr. That's your losses, but you bring in Klay Thompson, Naji Marshall, and Quentin Grimes, and it's like, yeah, you know what? I think I'm good with this. I think this is a solid upgrade. If not at every single level, then overwhelmingly the sum of what you got is better than what you're losing. And I think this is how you prove to your team and your guys, we're serious about going out and winning. We talked about like a 2-year window with Luka and Kyrie potentially. This is how you signal to them that you're serious and you're going for it. That's how you keep them driven and motivated and don't have them thinking like, well, that was fun, but maybe it's not here. Like more so in the Kyrie thing, because he's got year 2 now of his 3-year deal and he's got a player option. So feasibly, Kyrie could opt out after this next summer, and we could be trying to see where we're at then. So it's all fluid, man. That's why you got to look at these things, and that's why I think it's very, very crucial to prove to your guys that you're ready to go right now. Thought Bull is a better fit than Klay. Yeah, but I don't think that one was going to be as easy. Thunder is complete now, but OKC needs 2 more years of experience to adjust to the veterans of this league. I think OKC is going to be better than they were this year, and they were the 1 seed this year. I think if OKC had gotten past Dallas, I still think they could have beaten the Timberwolves. I don't think they would have beaten Boston, but I think they would have been in the position Dallas was and probably went in a similar way, either 4 or 5 games. But having said that, I don't know that they're 2 years away. Okay, I think OKC is going to be really a team to keep your eye on this year, health permitting, because their health was insanely good to them all year this past year. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I don't rule out at all what they've done. I absolutely love the offseason OKC has had. What about Monte Ellis or DeAndre Jordan? Sir, I will not have that name spoken here again. Dennis Smith Jr. or Spencer Dinwiddie. Real talk, I would like either of those. I know we gave Spencer, justly so, a lot of crap for his decision of like choosing the Lakers over the Mavericks. But even still, Spencer was serviceable here, and as long as you kept his role somewhat modest, could be a very nice second unit piece for you. And Dennis Smith Jr., man, I think he's deserving of an opportunity, and I would love it if he had a chance to do that here. But he would be such a reserve player here. I just don't know exactly what that looks like, but I love that dude's defense. The one thing he should at least thank Rick Carlisle for was Rick Carlisle basically told him, if you want to make it in this league, you're going to have to become a tenacious defender. Like, you cannot be just your athleticism with dunking and your streaky scoring. And the athleticism largely left him. The streaky scoring has been streakier even, but the defense that he developed at Rick's advisement and everything has kept him around. The energy in the defense has kept him around, and he has held on for dear life at the edge of several rosters. He's been Detroit, he's been Portland, he's been Charlotte. I mean, he's been several places. I would like to see one more shot at Dennis Smith Jr. here for sure. And I think Luka would love that, by the way. They were really tight their one season, not even full season, half season, whatever, together. Doug McDermott. McDermott would be a case of getting just a pure shooter off the bench, but I'm honestly not adept enough, in the know enough at this point of what Dougie McBuckets looks like as a player to know how much of a help it would be. But McDermott was solid for us. He just was here during a time when we had nothing else going on, and so it was kind of hard to quantify. Naji can play more physical than Derrick Jones Jr., can't navigate through screens like Derrick Jones, but is a way better on-ball defender. I appreciate that input, Frank. What's left for the Lakers? Buddy Hield. Yeah, that's a reasonable thing here. Gualberto Garcia was good. Is Klay's championship experience an important factor? I think so. I mean, anytime you add a guy that's been there and done that, you know he's not going to shrink from the moment. I'll be honest with you, man. Klay Thompson, I have largely not liked Klay Thompson in his NBA career. Not that I ever doubted or dismissed his talent, but I've, for so much of his career, felt like if you were with anybody but Steph and like tethered there to that dynasty, you would be a solid number 2 anywhere. You might have still won a championship somewhere, but like the level of arrogance he's flashed at times, right? He was the one up 3-1 poking the bear when LeBron was on the Cavs, and it led to that comeback in the 2016 finals. All of that was Klay, and so many comments he's made have just come across to me as arrogant and like a really inflated sense of self-import. I'm sure I'm going to hear some of that as well this year, and I'm sure some of that's going to like me be like, it's fine now, he's with us. He's our arrogant guy or whatever. But at the very least, I do look at, speaking of 2016, Game 6, Oklahoma City, the Thunder were up 3-1. His Game 6, he hits 8 threes. Steph couldn't throw it into the ocean that game. Maybe that's a bit harsh. That was like Durant and Westbrook combined when they went up 3-1 the last 3 games of the series. They couldn't do that. But like Klay single-handedly saved the Warriors season and got them to the finals. So I look at that and I'm like, he's got that ability. And especially for a guy that's just a spot-up shooter, even with the injuries he's had. If you just need him as a spot-up shooter and at least a capable defender, doesn't have to be a great defender like he once was, then yeah, I think it absolutely has worth and value, especially when you can anchor him defensively the way the Mavericks can with Lively and Gafford. That's the whole thing, is like you can have some deficiencies in your defensive skill set as long as you got the right anchors. And that's kind of like 2011 Mavericks. Like they were a very good defensive team, but like Dirk, at his best, Dirk was a hair above average as a defender. Jason Terry was never a great defender. You just had these guys like Kidd was still a capable defender. Certainly at times could really lock up and make guys work. Even your Kobe's, for instance, or your Dwayne Wade's. But, he couldn't do it like at length for long periods of time. Caron Butler was your second best player and defender, but he was gone for the season by that point. But a lot of things worked because you had the ultimate eraser at the back in Tyson Chandler. You kind of still have that, not just with Lively in my comparison, but also with what Gafford is able to bring to the table. So absolutely think that you can be solid even with these three. We've seen what a motivated, directed Luka and even Kai can do defensively. And I think Klay is probably in a similar boat. Adding his shooting is just icing on the cake. He doesn't have to dribble. I don't care if he dribbles the ball 3 bounces in a game, because odds are he's going to be just as likely to make 3 threes as he is to perform 3 ball bounces. Not 3 drives, 3 bounces of the ball. This is a dude who in his heyday would make more threes than he would dribbles. Now, I'm not even using that as an exaggeration. Like, ESPN would track this sort of thing. And that was always one of those things where I was like, that's a hell of a party trick, but it's also one of those things, too, where it's like, is it you? Like, to an extent, yes, but it's also the system and the talent around you. Well, fortunately, the system is here, and so is the talent around him. He doesn't have to be the second best guy here. He can be the third best guy here, and that is a great place to be. That's why I said it's not choosing Luka over LeBron, although, yes, 25 or whatever year old Luka should absolutely be chosen over 39-year-old LeBron. But it's Luka and Kyrie with all of Dallas's core over LeBron and made of glass AD at this stage of their career and what the Lakers have. It's just not the same. Southwest Division for the Mavericks is getting better. The Spurs getting Chris Paul, Thunder getting Caruso, iHeart, and the Pelicans getting, and Murray, No, you're right. And I don't care about divisions in the least, but yes, the West has gotten better, and the Pelicans getting Murray. First of all, it feels like there's a fire sale coming with Atlanta. In the East as a conference just seems determined to make the West better, continue to stretch that gap between the two conferences. But I really, really like what they've been able to do. So Chris Paul is going to be great for the Spurs. The Spurs are going to be better, obviously, year 2 of Wemby. But I don't know, man. I don't have the highest expectations of, like, I'm sure Chris Paul is going to make a lot of people, again, reevaluate him, just like when the Rockets jettisoned him to Oklahoma City. I just don't know that you repeat that magic of getting a middle-of-the-road playoff spot the way he did then. I feel like he's longer in the tooth, more limited than he was, and the West is just such a bloodbath. Klay averaged 17 on nearly 40% from 3. That is considered his worst season. I think people are overreacting to his 0 of 10 Kings game. There was drama all year for Golden State. It was time for a change. I like that perspective, Santos. Great perspective. Kyle Anderson or Lonnie Walker, great defenders as well. Yes, they are. Following the Warriors, Klay got us through when it got rough many times in the series. What you call arrogance is also always having confidence in himself and the team, no matter what. You need those guys, says Shawshank. Again, I appreciate the perspective. And yes, me from an outsider looking in, and at times, as I've said, if I have a second team, and it's a second team, it's Mavericks, significant step down just because I'm from this area, Oklahoma City, I always have a little bit of love for the Thunder. And so, yes, seeing him in 2016 rip out the Thunder's heart in Game 6, that very much resonates. And it stung all the more when then Kevin Durant turned full snake and flushed his legacy down the drain. So, yeah, I hear you. If Nico pulls a hat trick and also gets slow-mo on the squad, I'm buying a 12 and celebrating. All right. Does Klay help mold Lively into a 3-point marksman? I'm not going to rule it out, but, I don't know. Maybe. I honestly feel like Lively's already got all the shooting support that he needs. It never hurts to add more to it, but we'll see. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be practice shoot-arounds and stuff like that. The Mavericks are already doing those sorts of things. I'd rather my guy be overly confident than have his confidence shattered like the Warriors did to Klay with all the new changes and drama. Fair enough. It really is amazing the Warriors got that last title because Draymond knocking out Jordan Poole kind of felt like the end of that chapter, and yet they went on to win the title that year, which is just wild. So I'm impressed they pulled it off. But because they didn't have to just go through Dallas, they had to go through, again, Boston. But yeah, we'll see what ends up happening, what ends up coming of that. But it's been a very exciting couple days for the Mavericks here. Very, very much very much on board with what Nico's apparent vision is, his roster building, his decision making, his decisiveness more than anything. Again, I keep going back to this. Previous iterations of this Mavericks front office, whether it was Mark and Nico, whether it was Mark and Donnie, which we saw so many of those, would have probably hung around and tried to hold pat on Derrick Jones Jr. talks, saying like, hey, we don't want to lose him. He's got clear value, such a great locker room guy. All of that is true. Oh, okay. Pool thing was the year after. Gotcha. For some reason, I thought that was the same year. Woke up a champion. For some reason, or the Mavericks would have probably held pat, tried to hang on to Derrick Jones Jr., and I think it ultimately would have cost them any leverage or positioning in the conversation for Klay Thompson in this case. I think he would have been a Laker. That's what I am certain would have happened were it not for the change in ownership late in the year, and then Nico taking full control of all of that, basically ownership doing what I have begged Mark to do for years, and just step back, especially once Nico started to prove himself. Like, just step back. You just be the one signing the check. You don't have to do anything else. The new ownership group is doing that. They're saying, Nico, it's all you, man. Make it work. And Nico immediately rewards them with, I think, not one, not two, but three. Two very solid moves, and then I think a brilliant move. Regardless of what happens ultimately with Klay Thompson in Dallas, the fact that you pulled this off, only losing Josh Green and 2 second-round picks, that's a masterstroke. Like, that is a masterstroke. There's no other word for that. That is incredible asset management. And it's amazing that at the deadline last year, people had the audacity, national writers had the audacity to grade the PJ Washington trade and the Daniel Gafford trade so poorly, and saying the Mavericks gave up the only leverage they had, and their assets were depleted, and now they're going to be more depleted, and they only got marginally better at most. Nah, man, they made a jump from barely 500 to making the 5 seed and being in the NBA Finals. And now they got better again, I think, because I think the major deficiencies that ultimately cost them in the finals have been addressed. It's not to say that everything is perfect and this team is like positioned like Boston just was to make the run they did, which, by the way, now Boston being listed for sale is crazy. But being positioned where they are and trying to move forward here, they're well set up, I think the Mavericks are, to really, really do something. I'll be curious to see how they continue to move forward, how Klay looks, how he fits. But this was, you can only work with the information you have. The information you have says this guy makes you better. These moves that you've made make you better, and they address your biggest weakness that before we talked about it. Like, all right, defense, rebounding, and points in the paint translate even on the road, even when your three-point shot's not there. For 5 months, even when things were great, so often we were having to make that concession of like, okay, it's just going to be one of those nights that three-point shooting's not there, but I do believe in this team because of the defense. That's true, and it can be enough, but you literally needed just 1 or 2 more guys capable of being good three-point shooters to change the fate of what happened in the finals. A Klay Thompson, a Naji Marshall, and having, I think, even a Quentin Grimes, those all help you. So we'll see what comes of it. But I'm out of time, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see where Dallas goes from here, how they spend that remaining $4 million. I have every confidence Nico will do something that, even if it's something like Dante Exum, for instance, who, again, his impact much more so felt in the regular season. But when Dante Exum was signed, so many people I know, to an extent myself included, rolled our eyes and were like, that's your move, huh? That's okay. Okay. Some of them, by the way, were even calling for like Derrick Jones Jr. then. You still got him later, but when it happened, they weren't feeling it. They weren't there. And then you see like, oh, a month or so into the season, now it's like, oh, man, you know what? Dante Exum's got something. This was a nice pickup. The fact that you could see that again happening. You could see Nico Harrison picking someone up. Initially, us not being that moved by it, and then saying, yeah, no, that was a savvy pickup. That's where the relationship management thing, the Nike connection is so important. So we'll see. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Salute to our new subscriber, Shawshank. Appreciate you. If you haven't already, drop a like, leave a comment below, subscribe to the Dallas Prospect like our good friend Shawshank. And until next time, guys, remember, every legend was once a prospect. Peace!